Hi guys, this is Simon. So I wanted to make this Edpuzzle today to help you guys out with science. So remember we've been learning these past week about the hydrosphere, okay? And as we know, the hydrosphere has everything to do with the water on Earth. Yesterday we took a look at the specific oceans that make up the hydrosphere. So remember there's 5 different oceans, and we learned specifically why oceans are so important. Okay, and oceans are so important because they're actually home to 50%, half of all of Earth's living things. So the oceans are home to half of Earth's living things, which include plants and animals. Okay, so half of all the plants and animals on Earth actually live in the ocean. We also learned, just like on land, how there's volcanoes and mountains and trenches and all of those different landforms. There's landforms underwater too. We just don't see them because they're under the water. But the landforms in the ocean are quite similar to the landforms on land. All right, so today we are going to continue to look at the ocean, and we're going to specifically look at ocean temperatures, okay? So the temperature of the ocean. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Make sure if I highlight it, you write it down in your notes. All right, so in our notes, please, ocean temperatures. Ocean temperatures. So the further you travel away from the equator, the ocean waters generally become colder, okay? So remember, with the equator is that imaginary line that splits the Earth in half, okay? So the further away you get from that equator, the colder the water becomes, okay? So the further you travel away from the equator, the ocean waters generally become colder. And that makes sense because if you think about it, guys, okay, if we think of the equator is at the center of the Earth, okay? It's what? The imaginary line that splits the Earth in half, okay? If you've ever looked at the Earth before, you know that Florida is actually very close to the equator. And if you guys have ever been to the beaches in Florida, the water, the ocean water is actually very warm. But as you get farther away from that equator, if you think about the North and the South Pole, those are the farthest points away from the ocean, though that ocean water there is actually frozen. It's very cold. So the further you get from away from the equator, the colder the water is. So near the equator, surface water temperatures can be as high as 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which if we compare that to, like, say, a summer day, usually a summer day is around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So near the equator, the water there is 80 degrees, okay? So again, think about water near Florida, that's going to be 80 degrees. But near the poles, okay, near the North and South Pole, temperature in the ocean drops to chilly 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So we know that 32 degrees Fahrenheit is freezing. So it's 28. So it's below freezing as you get farther away from that equator. All right, moving on. So climate control. So water responds to temperature change more slowly than land does. Okay, what that means is it takes longer to heat water and longer for it to cool down. Therefore, locations near the oceans experience milder climate changes. Okay, so their temperatures don't change as drastically because water responds to temperature change more slowly than land. Basically, what that means, guys, is it takes longer to heat water than it does land. Okay, so you can kind of think about this. If you've ever been to the beach, okay, you might feel like the sand and the beach is really, really hot. So that land kind of soaked up those sun's ray a lot quicker than the water. Okay, so the water is usually actually colder, it's cooler than the sand itself because it takes a longer amount of time for water to get cooler, and it takes longer for water to get hotter. Okay, so if you notice when you go to, like, Lake Michigan, I'm sure many of you have been to Lake Michigan. When you guys go to Lake Michigan in the summertime, the water is still really cold. Okay, that's because it takes water longer to heat up, okay, than it does for land. All right, so go ahead and put this in our notes, please. Water responds to temperature change more slowly than land does. It takes longer to heat water and longer for it to cool down. So if people are living by an ocean, okay, it takes longer to heat the water and it takes longer for it to cool down. So therefore, locations near the oceans experience milder climate changes, which means locations near the ocean and near water have milder climate changes, which means their temperatures don't change as drastically. Okay, you guys might notice sometimes when you're by the beach, okay, or you're by the lake, the temperature is a little bit warmer, okay, than where everybody else is because it's by an area of water. By an ocean, they have less temperature changes. So we'll go ahead and add that to our notes. Locations near the oceans experience milder climate changes. Remember, milder means less, so they experience less climate change. All right, guys, moving on. Ocean's impact on weather. So even if you're hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, and we are, okay, we have a lake by us, but we don't have an ocean, the weather is impacted by Earth's oceans. Energy from the sun is absorbed, stored, and transported by the ocean, which affects temperature, precipitation, and wind. So basically what this is saying, guys, is no matter what, okay, your weather is impacted by oceans. Doesn't matter if you're real close to an ocean, doesn't matter if you're thousands of miles away from the ocean. The ocean is impacting weather on Earth. It impacts weather everywhere on Earth. So oceans impact on weather. And go ahead and put this down. Even if you are hundreds of miles from the Earth's ocean, your weather is impacted by the ocean. Okay. So it doesn't matter where you are on Earth, your weather is being impacted by the ocean in one way or another. Oh, this map here, you can kind of see, guys, all of these arrows. You see water being pulled, wind being pulled. So one form or another, eventually your weather is coming in contact with something that was from an ocean, okay? So it doesn't matter where you are on Earth, oceans are impacting your weather. Ocean's ability to absorb and store heat helps to regulate the temperature, create strong winds, and produce precipitation. So like we were saying, guys, right, if you are closer to the ocean, you have less temperature changes, okay? So if we look at these two graphs, which climate would you expect to be located near an ocean and why? Okay, if you look at this first graph, okay, this is something you might see towards near an ocean because it's kind of not as drastic with those temperature changes, okay? Because remember, they have milder temperature changes, all right? So they're not as drastic with the temperature changes. So which of the following is not correct about the ocean's impact on weather and climate? Not correct. Ocean absorbs, store, and transport energy from the sun. Oceans only impact the weather of areas that border them. So that's saying they only have an impact on little areas. Oceans support a wide diversity of life, meaning that they have thousands and thousands of different organisms that live in the ocean. Or landforms similar to those on land can be found beneath the oceans, which is not correct. If you said oceans only impact the weather of areas that border them, you are correct. Remember, oceans impact the weather everywhere. No matter how far or close you are to an ocean, your weather is being impacted. Which location on the map would experience the most temperate climate? What that means, guys, is which of those is going to have a milder climate, so less temperature changes? So which of those is the closest to an ocean? If you said A, you are correct. Okay, A right here, you can see A is close to an ocean. That is actually the Pacific Ocean. Okay, if you said D, D is not an ocean. D is close to a lake. Okay, that's kind of where we're at, and we're similar and close to a lake. We're talking about an ocean. They got to be closer to an ocean. A is the closest to an ocean. All right, guys, so a couple things to take away from today's lesson is that oceans, the farther away you get from the equator, the colder the water is going to be. And oceans, okay, it takes longer for water to change temperatures than it does for land. So it takes water longer to heat up and it takes water longer to cool down. And finally, no matter where you are on Earth, your weather is being impacted by the oceans. Hope that this video was helpful and I'll see you guys later.